My name is Luis Alberto Ramirez, but all my life they called me Luis. I was 52 years old when I finally dared to tell this. I was born in Puebla, in a simple neighborhood, one of those where everyone knows each other, and the bread still came out warm from the corner bakery. My dad left young. I barely remembered him. So I grew up more attached to my mom. I was the oldest of three, and since I was a kid, I had to work. First in small shops, then in a small carpentry shop, where I learned to sand without biting my nails and to measure by eye, without the boss yelling at me. I wasn't of long school, just high school, and the truth, it didn't shame me. I was of hands, of pulling, of arriving home with my shirt all full of sawdust. That was my thing. At 37 years old, I came to the United States. It wasn't a pretty or romantic decision. It was because it wasn't enough anymore. Over there in Puebla, the job was getting loose, and it already hurt me to tell my wife, Rosa, that again we didn't complete for the rent, that again we were going to get credit at the little store. I couldn't continue like that. A childhood friend, El Guero, called me from Los Angeles and told me, "Fall for here. There's work. Fine carpentry, pure good wood. I'll teach you to move yourself, and then already you let yourself go." I was afraid, yes, and also ashamed to leave. But I got on the bus with a small backpack and crossed. It wasn't epic. It was tiring and ugly, as everyone tells. I arrived with what I was wearing, with my head full of promises that I made to myself for not cracking myself. In Los Angeles, I slept first on the floor of a room rented among 5. There were 2 bunk beds and a mattress thrown to the edge. That was my place. It smelled of stored food, of socks, of work. But I felt safe. There no one asked me for papers, only punctuality. On the 3rd day, I was already in a workshop. The boss, a serious Salvadoran, put me to sand doors and to clean the sawdust. I didn't complain. After a week, they already let me take measurements. After 2 weeks, I started cutting, and after 3 months, they entrusted me with pieces for a complete kitchen. It was fine carpentry, the kind that makes your forehead sweat and brings a smile to your face when you see the piece standing, straight, shining. I liked it. They paid me for doing something that I understood, and besides, I could put in overtime hours. At that time, I felt that my body was enough for everything, that I could carry, cut, install, and still go back to wash my clothes by hand if the washing machine was busy. The first month that I got paid well with overtime and 2 installations, I went to the Western Union. I remember as if it had happened yesterday. The long line, the people with the forms in their hand, all looking at their cell phone or looking at the floor. I sent money to Puebla, in my mother's name. I called her leaving with the ticket folded in the pocket. "Mom, I already sent it to you. It's not much, but we already started." She cried a little. I listened to her in silence. I was always half dry for talking, but those words came out alone. "Don't worry, Mom. I am going to fulfill my promise to you." She told me not to neglect myself, to eat, not to stay up so much. That's how it always was with her, scolding and sweet. I answered her yes, that I was fine, that everything was going to arrange itself. I had a plan. In my head, it was clear. Work, save, send each month something fixed. Set it aside from here for my rent, my food, my Suave Mid shirts, and the rest for Mexico. My dream was to lift a house. Not a mansion, no. A big, solid house of 2 floors, with a patio where I could put a grill and an extra room in case someday my children wanted to stay a season. I imagined smooth walls, wooden doors that I myself would make when I returned. A spacious kitchen where my mom no longer had to cook bent over. I saw myself old there but calm, listening to the radio, taking some naps, without worrying about leaks. I managed to get used to life here. I bought an old truck, a Ford, that left me stranded more than once, but that I myself fixed with YouTube videos and advice from the paisas in the workshop. I learned to locate the good lunch trucks, to order my breakfast in broken English. I understood how to move around without problems, how to avoid troubles with the police, how to keep a low profile. I worked with gringos, with Salvadorans, with Guatemalans, with other Mexicans. We were all in the same situation. Each one brought their story, their reason, their debt. During the break, with the coffee going seeing in a styrofoam cup, we told each other about our families, about the children who were growing up there, about the bills that never forgave. I was not the only one who sent remittances, of course. But to me, that monthly sending gave me meaning, it told me. I did not forget where I am from. I did not just come to survive. I came to build something. In carpentry, I became good at measuring with patience, at not rushing if it wasn't necessary. I always had my tape measure hung in a small box with my own screwdrivers, with my marked drill bits. I liked good wood, oak, maple, those boards that weigh and that smell of work. When it was my turn for installation in big houses around here, I looked at the stairs, the closets, and in my head, I made my little house in Puebla. Something like that. But my way, I told myself. I did not need luxury. I wanted firmness. I talked with my mom every Sunday. It was sacred. I bought a card, recharged it, or got on WhatsApp when I got good internet. She told me about the weather, about the neighbor who got sick, about the man on the corner who sold garnaches, simple things. And I told her about the traffic, that the boss was in a good mood, that they had paid me overtime, that I missed the mold of Sundays. I was never much for opening my heart. But with my mom it came out, I told her, softly, that sometimes I got tired, that my hands hurt, and that at night I dreamed of returning. Almost there, my son, almost there, she repeated to me. And I believed her, because I wanted to believe her, because that almost there pushed me to get up at 5 in the morning and to get in the truck half asleep. In those years, many things happened. I saw rare workshops. I saw others open. I changed rooms several times. Sometimes I lived with quiet people, sometimes with noisy boys who played music all night. Shared bathroom, refrigerator, table. I learned to label my things so they wouldn't disappear. I learned not to fight over trivialities. A distant cousin arrived and stayed for a while. I helped him find work. Afterwards, he followed his path. That's how life was here, passing through, but constant. I clung to my routine because there I felt safe. Sweet bread and coffee in the morning, sandwich during the break, taco in the lunchbox, quick bath at night and to sleep. On Fridays, if I had enough, I bought myself a cold soda and a bag of chips. Small rewards. When it went well for me, I sent a little more. When it went regularly for me, I sent just enough. I always tried not to fail. I liked to arrive at Western Union with my head held high, even if I was tired. Sometimes, to the one who attended, I told him joking, "You already know where it's going, boss?" And he laughed. We knew each other already by face. I kept every receipt in a small shoebox. I put date, quantity, and sometimes a little note for the land, for the rebar, for the foundations. They were my proofs for myself. in case one day I needed to remind myself that I was not dreaming crazy, that I was doing what I had to do. With my wife, the calls were less frequent. I'm not going to lie. Distance does its thing. At first, we talked daily, then every third day, then once a week. She had her life there, her jobs and houses, her commitments. I had my routine here and then. When I hung up, I was left with the noise of the refrigerator, and that's it. Sometimes we argued over small things, over silly jealousy, over the lack of time. It made me angry that they asked me if I was changing. If I had already forgotten my family, no, I did not forget. If something hurt me, it was precisely that. Working here for there without being able to hug anyone. Regarding my health, I took care of myself as best I could. My back hurt, of course. I got calluses, my hands got dry. I started using gloves, drinking more water, stretching. On Sundays, I walked in a park. I sat to watch others play soccer. It made me want to. But I no longer threw myself in. I didn't want to hurt myself. One day, I happened to see a man my age fall from a ladder. It wasn't serious, but they took him out in an ambulance. That day, I promised myself not to do brave things, just to look good. Taking care of myself was also part of the plan. Sometimes they asked me why I didn't bring my mom with me. I said no, that she was better there, that she would miss her plants, her friends, the church on the corner. Besides, the idea was always another, that I would return, not that she would emigrate at her age, and I repeated it to myself when nostalgia hit me. I am just passing through, I am just passing through. That didn't prevent that at night. In the dark, it made me angry to hear laughter outside. To know that there in Puebla, that same day, they were at a party, and I here eating an instant ramen because I was lazy to cook. That's the life of the one who leaves. One chooses, but it hurts. I didn't get rich, nor did things go badly for me. I was a diligent worker. I earned the trust of the bosses. They gave me keys to the workshop. They asked me to teach the new ones how to measure without wasting material. That filled me. I saw the apprentice with the loose tape and told him, "Calm down, buddy. Measure 2 times and cut 1. I like to feel useful, not just for the money, also for what I knew. And every fortnight, same, 1 part for here, 1 part for there. With that, my head calmed down. The truth, I was always trustworthy, especially with my mom. I don't know if because I was the oldest or because she made me feel that I was her support, her pride. When we talked about the house plan, she told me that she was looking at Don Tonio's land, that it was very cheap, that it just needed to be set aside. I nodded from the other side of the phone and already noted. Don Tonio's land. Then she told me that the master bricklayer, a political cousin, could start with the footing when there was money for the rebar and cement. I imagined the trenches, the rope, the test pits. Everything lived in my head, as if it already existed. When I had a day off, I went to Home Depot to walk, just to see. I stopped in the door aisle and started choosing in my mind which one would be for my house. 2 bedrooms upstairs, 1 downstairs, solid door for the entrance, wide window for the living room. I already carried the house as if tattooed on my forehead, even if it didn't exist yet, and that image helped me get up. When the alarm clock thundered at 5, I would say, "Now Luis Jamero reads." I had scares. How not? One time the police stopped us at an installation. They asked for permits, checked everyone. The boss came out and spoke for us. It was arranged. Another time the workshop was out of work for a month, and I got into installing floors with some guys from Jalisco so as not to remain with my arms crossed. I went to Santa Ana. I returned. I went up. I went down. In every movement, my receipt box accompanied me. It was my little altar, my reminder that that sacrifice had a name and surname. And yes, there were days when I wanted to return with nothing. No more grabbing the first bus and planting myself there. But then I breathed and told myself that I couldn't throw everything overboard, that I had already been advancing for years, that I was not one to back down at the first sign. Besides, my mom would get excited when I talked to her about the plan, when I sent her for the land. That emotion of hers fed me. I would hang up and I would stay with a smile. With my chest tight, yes, but with a smile. I don't know if I explained myself well. I was a common man. A carpenter who woke up early, who ate where he could, who saved what he could, who got confused with English, but still went to ask for discounts. I didn't have big vices. I didn't go out to party. I didn't get into trouble. All mine was to work and send. Sometimes I got tired of repeating it to myself. It bothered me to hear myself say the same thing every month. I already sent. But it also gave me pride. Because among so many people who get lost along the way, I kept myself straight. That's what I thought. Years passed like this. I sacrificed birthdays, Christmases, baptisms. I saw photos on WhatsApp. I heard, I wish I were taken out so many times that I didn't even answer anymore. I just sent a heart or a thumbs up. My hands became harder, my gray hairs came out without asking my permission. But I kept going. I don't know if out of stubbornness or out of love. I guess for both things. The immigrant's life is like that. One gets used to living with the suitcase mentally packed, always dreaming of the day of return. And I kept dreaming of that house, with that piece of firm ground where one day I would finally sit down to drink coffee without a clock, listening to the street noise, greeting the neighbors who saw me grow up. That was what sustained me. That and my mom's voice on Sundays telling me, "God bless you, my son." I would hang up and think, yes, may he bless me, because tomorrow you have to give it again. When I think about my childhood, the first thing that comes to my mind is not school, nor friends. It is the house where I grew up. That small house, with peeling walls and a tin roof, that in the afternoons would heat up like an oven, and in the early mornings would make you shiver from cold. The 4 of us lived there. My mom, my 2 brothers and I. We had only one room to sleep, with improvised beds and a table that served as a dining table and a desk when someone had homework. The kitchen was a small separate room, with a dirt floor and a stove where my mom spent hours, with her apron stained and her hair tied up. Sometimes when it rained hard, water would get in through the edges of the roof and we had to put out buckets. I remember the drumming sound of water falling inside and my mom getting up in the middle of the night to move them. Because if they filled up, it splashed everything. We didn't have anything left over, but we also didn't lack the basics, and despite everything, I grew up with the idea that someday we would have something better. I didn't say it out loud, but I dreamed it. My mom always talked about the beautiful house that someday we were going to have. That's what she called it, the beautiful house. She didn't say big nor luxurious, beautiful. And I imagined smooth walls painted white, a kitchen with tiles, a floor that was not swept with a broom of sticks, but with a mop, like that of the houses I saw when I accompanied my mom, when cleaning in neighborhoods of people with more money. I remember once, I would have been about 10 years old, that my mom took me to help her in a house where she worked cleaning by hours. It was a huge house for my child eyes. 2 floors, wooden stairs that creaked beautifully, large windows through which light entered. The lady for whom my mom worked offered us flavored water in crystal glasses. I stayed looking at the glass because in my house everything was plastic or pewter. That day, while we were returning walking, my mom told me, "Look, son, I don't say that we live like them, but one day we are going to have a house of our own." Well made so that it does not happen is what I happen. I believed her. I don't know why, but I believed her with all my heart. In the afternoons when I returned from school and my mom from work, we sat outside on the sidewalk and she talked to me about how that house would be. She told me that it was going to have a patio so that my brother and I could play without getting dirty with mud, and that there would be a tree to give shade. I like to imagine a mango tree, although in Puebla it didn't grow so easily. Sometimes I drew the house in an old notebook, a big door, 2 windows, a red roof. And although my drawings were crooked, my mom looked at them as if they were architect's blueprints. Not everything was beautiful, of course. Growing up in that old house also meant listening to neighbor fights, dealing with leaks, with the humidity that smelled strange in rainy season. In December, the cold got in everywhere, and in April, the heat left you without desire to move. But there were also moments that I now remember with affection. On Sundays, my mom cooked something special, sometimes mole, sometimes pozole, and we gathered around the table, even if it was small. She put on the radio and sang while chopping onion. I learned many songs that way, listening from a corner while she cooked. I remember that at Christmas, even if there were no expensive gifts, my mom always managed to give us something. Once, she gave me a ball that she had bought secondhand, but for me it was new. That ball I used until all the air came out of it. My mom told me that one day she was going to have money to give us things without waiting for Christmas or birthdays. And I nodded, although I didn't understand well where that money would come from. In adolescence, I started working to help in the house. I sold elotes, I washed cars, and later, as I already told, I entered a carpentry shop. But even so, the money never reached to make big repairs. If something broke in the house, my mom looked for a neighbor who knew how to repair cheaply. Or she put me to try it. I changed panes, nailed boards. I even put a piece of sheet metal myself when I was 15 years old. It didn't turn out well, but at least it covered the rain. Every time we made some repair, my mom said jokingly, "This is just for now, because when we have the beautiful house, there we are going to do everything well." And I, although I knew that house seemed distant, I clung to the idea. Time passed, and my brothers made their lives. I kept working in whatever came up, and although the dream of the beautiful house was still there, it seemed like something one says so as not to lose hope, more than a real plan, until I came to the United States. That's when I thought, now I really can achieve it. Because although life here is hard, it is also true that if you work a lot and don't overspend, you can save faster than there. When I started sending money, it wasn't just to help with my mom's expenses. It was for that dream we had sown since I was a child. For me, every dollar sent was like a brick placed in that house that still didn't exist. And every time my mom told me she had seen a plot of land, or that the builder so-and-so could do the work, I would get excited like that child who drew houses in a notebook. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt that I wasn't building just any house. It was as if I was closing a cycle. The child who slept in a leaky room was going to become the man who could give his mother a firm roof. It wasn't just cement and bricks. It was dignity. It was fulfilling a promise that had been kept for years. And yes, There were days when memories came to me so clear that I could even smell the dampness of the old walls. I could hear the creak of the wooden door swollen by the rain, feel the suffocating heat under the sheets in April. But in those same memories was also my mom's voice saying, "One day we are going to have something better, son. You'll see." Those memories were my engine. While other co-workers here spent on new cars or on outings every weekend, I thought about my beautiful house. It's not that I didn't want to indulge in luxuries, but every time I felt like buying something expensive, I would tell myself, better for the land. And I held back. Because in my head, every sacrifice had a clear purpose. That my mom would stop living as we had always lived. Now that I think about it, perhaps that's why I trusted so much. Because the story of the beautiful house wasn't born when I arrived in the United States. It was born when I was 10 years old, sitting on a dusty bench, listening to my mom dream out loud. And when one grows up with a dream like that, one doesn't think that the person who shared it with you could break it. When I arrived in the United States, I didn't bring much more than my clothes, some photos, and an address written on a crumpled paper. Life here is unforgiving, and I knew it from the first day. But I also knew that here, if one applies oneself, the work yields more than there. That's why, from my first check, I already had in mind that a part was going to go directly to Puebla. It wasn't easy. I received my first salary after 2 weeks of sanding, sweeping, and learning to use new tools. When they gave it to me, I counted it 3 times because I couldn't believe that in so little time I earned what there would have taken me a month or more. Of course, here everything cost more, but even so, a little bit was left over. And that little bit for me had a fixed destination. My mom. I remember the first time I went to send money. I didn't even know how to fill out the form. A countryman in the line helped me and told me, "You write your name here, the name of the person who receives it there, and that's it." When they gave me the receipt, I saved it as if it were an important government paper. In fact, I still have it in that little shoebox where I accumulated all the receipts from those years. I already called my mom as soon as I left. I told her, "Mom, I already sent it. It's not much, but it's for her to have." She started to cry. I stayed silent, listening to her broken breathing. She told me not to worry, that with that it was enough for the pantry and to set aside a little for the land. When I heard those words, I felt that the dream we had talked about so many times was starting to take shape. That's how it all began. Every fortnight, the same. I worked, set aside for my rent, for my food, and the rest I sent. Sometimes I sent 100, sometimes 200, sometimes more, if I did well with overtime. I never missed a month. Even if I had to eat instant soups all week, the sending was done. In the workshop where I worked, several colleagues did the same. Some sent so their wife would pay the children's school, others to fix their parents' house, others to buy livestock. I always said that mine was for my mom's beautiful house. It was like a joke among us. When one got paid, the other would ask if he was going to buy the mansion in his town. I laughed, but inside it was serious. At first, the idea was to save up for the land. My mom told me on the phone that she was looking at options, that there was one on the back street, that it was well located, and that the owner wanted to sell fast. I sent her a little more that month for her to set it aside. She told me it was already spoken for, that only some papers were missing. I did not doubt. I trusted her like no one. She was my mom, the one who had taken care of me, the one who had given me everything she could. Months passed, and I kept sending. Sometimes she told me that another better located land had come out, or that it was better to wait to get a cheaper one. I nodded and told her that it was fine. It never crossed my mind that something could go wrong. My routine was clear. Waking up before the sun came out, drinking black coffee and a piece of bread. Driving to the workshop, working until my hands became stiff. Returning to the rented room, showering, having a simple dinner, and if it was sending day, passing by the Western Union. There, among the line of countrymen, I felt something I cannot explain. A mix of tiredness and pride. Tiredness for everything that being here implied. Pride because I knew I was fulfilling. Sundays were long call day. I sat on the bed with the cell phone charging and talked with my mom. She told me that she had bought some rebar, that the so-and-so bricklayer was ready to start, that the godmother had told her that she knew an architect who could do a good design. I closed my eyes and imagined everything. The mix falling, the walls rising, the roof firm. I lived more in that image than in my reality, because here my life was simple and repetitive. I didn't go out much. I didn't spend on luxuries. Sometimes I indulged myself. A good jacket in winter. Some new sneakers when the old ones no longer gave more. But nothing that affected the sending. Even when the room rent went up, the first thing I thought was, how do I make sure I don't send less to my mom? And I found the way. I cut expenses. I stopped going out to eat outside. There were hard days. Once I was out of work for 2 weeks because the workshop had problems with a big order. In those days, I worked with a friend installing floors. It was hard and poorly paid. But I didn't stop sending. Another year, I got sick with my back and was about to tell my mom that month I wouldn't be able to send her. But something inside me didn't let me. I sold some extra tools I had, and with that I managed. Little by little, the figure in my head grew. I calculated that in about 5 or 6 more years, the house would be ready. And every time I spoke with my mom, she fed that illusion. She told me that the land was already secured, that they had started laying foundations, that soon there would be photos. I asked her to send them to me. But there was always some problem, that the camera didn't work, that she had erased them, that she would better show them to me in person when I went. I never doubted. I don't know if out of naivety or out of love, but I never doubted. When one is far away, one gets the habit of trusting blindly. Because if you start to distrust, everything falls apart for you. And I couldn't afford the luxury of that dream falling apart for me. In those years, sending money became like clockwork. Just as I knew that Tuesday's installation was due in such a house, or that Fridays there was payment. I knew that every fortnight there was an envelope of dollars that converted into pesos, traveled to Puebla. It was an invisible thread that kept me united with my mom. And to that piece of land I still didn't know, but that I already felt was mine. My companions told me I was crazy, that I shouldn't rely so much on a single person, that I should put the money in a bank, or that I should buy the land myself in my name. I answered them, "It's my mom. How am I going to distrust?" And there the conversation ended. I clung to the idea that every dollar sent was one step closer to returning. I imagined the day of my return, me getting off the bus, seeing the finished house, hugging my mom at the door. That thought helped me endure cold winters, scorching summers, and weeks of tireless work. And so the years passed, 15 to be exact. 15 years of sending money, of imagining walls rising, of keeping receipts as if they were treasures, of listening to promises on the other end of the line. 15 years in which my life revolved around a single goal: to fulfill the dream of the beautiful house. 15 years passed flying and dragging at the same time. I don't know how to explain it. On one hand, I felt that every day was the same, a routine that didn't change: getting up, working, sending money. On the other, when I realized more than a decade had already passed since the last time I'd seen my mom in person. It was a December just before Christmas, when I decided it was already time to return to Mexico, even if it was for a few weeks. I had done well that year. The boss had given me a bonus for a big job. And additionally, a client paid me in cash for making him some custom furniture. I gathered everything and said, "That's it. I'm going to see the house, too." The idea of seeing the finished house brought me an emotion that wouldn't let me sleep. In my head, I already had everything planned: getting off the bus, hugging my mom, walking together to that house that I had paid for brick by brick from afar. I dreamed of entering, touching the walls, opening the doors I imagined so many times, and sitting in the patio to drink coffee. I told my mom a few weeks before. I wanted to give her a surprise at first, but I thought it was better that she prepare herself. I told her I was going to arrive on December 20th, that she should wait for me. She got nervous, as if she didn't know what to say. She told me, "Oh, son, how nice, but..." And suddenly, "Why so soon?" I laughed. "Well, it's time, isn't it? 15 more years. I want to see the house." She was silent for a second, and then said, "Yes. Yes, of course. We'll wait for you here." I didn't think much about her reaction. I was so excited that I overlooked that strange tone in her voice. The journey was long. I crossed the border, took buses, passed through roads I no longer recognized. As I approached Puebla, my heart beat faster. I was seeing the fields, the houses, the people in the streets, and it made me want to cry. Everything seemed smaller to me, but just as familiar. I arrived a day earlier than planned, without warning. I wanted to give her a surprise, although she knew I was coming. I got off the bus with my backpack and a wrapped gift from my mom, a new coffee maker. I walked the last streets with a mix of nerves and happiness. When I arrived at the house where I had grown up, everything was the same, too much the same. The peeled walls, the tin roof, the same old windows. I thought that maybe my mom was still living there while the new house was somewhere else. I knocked on the door. She came out, hugged me tight, crying. I also cried, of course. Feeling her again after so many years was like going back to being a child. But after the hug, my first question came out on its own. And the house, right? She stood looking at me, and at that moment I knew something was not right. She told me to sit down, that she had to explain to me. I didn't want to sit down. I wanted her to take me to see it. But she insisted. We sat at the old table, the same as always, and there she began to tell me things that left me stunned. There was no house. There was no land. There was nothing. The money I sent for 15 years, according to her, had gone into necessary things. Pay debts of my brothers, medicines for a sick uncle, fix the roof for a niece, family parties, even help neighbors because how to tell them no. Every peso that I had saved with so much effort, every dollar that I had counted before sending it, had been spent on everything but the house. I remained silent. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I felt as if I had been punched in the chest. The only thing I could say was, "And why didn't you tell me, Ma?" She began to justify herself. She told me that she always thought that later she would replace it, that they would gather it again, that there was always something urgent that couldn't wait. She spoke to me, but I no longer listened. My ears buzzed. I looked around and saw the same old house. The same stained walls, the same dirt floor kitchen. It was as if all my sacrifice had not happened. As if those 15 years were a dream. I got up and went out to the street without saying anything. I walked aimlessly, seeing the neighbors' houses. Some had improved, painted, enlarged. And me? I had worked like a donkey for 15 years to return to the same starting point. It wasn't just the money. It was the trust. I had believed in my mom more than anyone. I had given her not only my savings, but my hope of returning and having something of my own. And all that was gone. That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed in the room that was mine before leaving, looking at the ceiling. I thought about every extra shift I worked. About every night I went to sleep hungry so as not to spend too much. About every time I said no to an outing or a pleasure because that's for the house. And now, nothing. The next day I tried to talk to her, but it was like hitting a wall. She said she had done it out of necessity, that I didn't understand what it was like to be here dealing with problems every day. I replied that I did understand, but that at least she should have told me, that she shouldn't have made me believe that everything was going well. It hurt me more than I thought possible. It wasn't just that there was no house. It was that suddenly I felt foolish, naive. I felt that everyone had been right when they told me not to entrust everything to a single person, even if it was my mom. And that feeling, that's the one that I still find hard to shake off. I didn't want to stay long. I visited some relatives, saw some childhood friends. But the illusion with which I had arrived had broken into 1,000 pieces. And when I took the bus back, I knew that I was not going to see Puebla with the same eyes again. That trip changed me forever. I don't know if for good or for bad, but it changed me. The first minutes after my mom told me the truth were a black hole. I couldn't even think straight. It was as if the words bounced off my head without finding where to stay. There is no house, there is no land. The money was spent. I kept repeating that to myself, and it didn't sink in. 15 years summarized in a phrase that left me breathless. I left the house like someone who needs to breathe. I didn't yell. I didn't cry at that moment. I walked down the street, seeing everything the same as when I left. Don's taco stand was still on the corner. Doña Chayo's store with the same rusted sign. The children playing on the sidewalk with deflated balls. And me there, feeling like a stranger in my own neighborhood. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper. A mix of sadness, shame, and a pain that squeezed my chest. I felt as if something that cannot be replaced had been torn from me. Because money? Yes, it can be earned again. But trust, time, that no. Those 15 years I don't recover with anything. I remembered all the times that here in the United States, I went without eating something I craved because that is for the house. Of the cold early mornings installing furniture in other people's houses, imagining that one day I was going to have my own. Of the Fridays when I saw my companions go off to celebrate. And I went straight to sleep because Saturday was another shift. I wondered if she ever thought about what it cost me. If when she took the money to pay for my cousin's quinceañera party or to lend to a neighbor, she imagined that I had broken my back to earn it. If it crossed her mind that I was living in a rented room, sharing a bathroom with 4 people to be able to send that amount without fail. The rage started to rise in me suddenly. I felt used. As if for 15 years I had been the family's ATM, without the right to express an opinion. And the worst, it's that it was my mom. The person I trusted the most. That was what hurt the most. If it had been anyone else, a friend, an acquaintance, I would get angry. But it wouldn't break me like this. But that it was her. That broke me. That night, not to me. I stayed sitting on the bed, looking at the floor. I heard my mom moving in the kitchen, as if she wanted to come closer, but without daring. And I, honestly, didn't know if I wanted to hear more explanations. What was she going to tell me? That she did it out of necessity? That she had no option? That it was to help the family? All that she had already said. And no matter how much she repeated it, it didn't erase the fact that she lied to me for 15 years. All the Sunday calls came to my mind. Her voice telling me, "Almost there, my son. We are already advancing." Every time she told me that. I woke up on Monday with more desire, thinking that the effort was worth it. And now I realized that they were empty words. Like patting someone on the back so they keep running, even if there's no finish line. The next day, I tried to talk to her again. I told her I didn't understand how she could spend everything on other things without even telling me. That I wouldn't have told her no if it was something really urgent, but that I would have liked to decide. She looked at me with teary eyes and said, "It's just that you were over there, son. And I here saw everything that was happening. I couldn't let the family go without food, without medicine." And I answered her, "I am not part of the family. My life no longer counts." She didn't know what to say. And I also didn't feel like continuing to talk. It was as if words were no longer useful for anything. That week I moved through the town like a ghost. I greeted people, yes, but without joy. I saw friends I hadn't seen since I left. Some told me, "Hey, Luis, in the house. Your mom said you were doing something big." I changed the subject. I couldn't explain to them without my voice trembling. One afternoon, I passed by an empty lot on a street I liked. I stood looking at the ground, imagining that my house could have been there. My chest hurt as if something had been nailed into me. I couldn't help but think of everything I would have done if the money had been safe. That feeling of betrayal accompanied me until I returned to the United States. And there it was worse, because I found myself again with my routine, but without the engine that had moved me for so many years. Before, when I got up at 5 in the morning, I did it thinking about the house. Now, what for? The dream was broken. It was hard for me to get back into rhythm at work. The boss noticed I was distracted. A colleague told me, "I notice you're down, Luis." And I just told him, "Problems at home." I didn't want to go into details. It made me ashamed. I didn't want people to think I was a fool for trusting so much. The rage didn't leave me quickly. Sometimes it caught me driving, and without realizing it, I was gripping the steering wheel so hard that my hands hurt. Other times I would stay looking at my remittance receipts, one by one remembering where I was when I sent each amount. It was like reliving the sacrifice, but now without reward. I'm not going to lie. I came to hate my mom for a while. It hurt me to admit it, but that's how it was. Because she didn't just take my money, she took away my illusion of returning with something to show. She took away my right to decide about what I earned. And at night, when everything was silent, the hardest question came to me. Was it worth leaving? Was it worth losing 15 years of my life with my family to end up in the same place? I don't have the answer yet. What I do know is that that wound stayed with me. And although the anger has been fading with time, the distrust has not. I no longer see my mom the same way. I love her, yes, because she is my mom. But there is a distance that I don't know if someday it will close. After that trip to Puebla, nothing was ever the same again. Neither me, nor my relationship with my mom, nor the way I saw my own life here in the United States. It was as if the engine that moved me had been suddenly ripped out. And the worst is that, although I wanted to leave everything behind and move on, I couldn't. The rage and disappointment followed me everywhere. When I returned to Los Angeles, my workshop colleagues greeted me with their usual jokes. "And the mansion, Luis," one said to me laughing. I just smiled forcedly and said, "It's coming, someday." I lied. I didn't want to tell them. I didn't want them to see me as a naive person who let himself be fooled. Here among countrymen, one always gives advice not to trust everything to one single person. And I had overlooked that advice. I was ashamed to admit it. The first months were tough. I got up to work out of habit, not out of desire. Before, when I carried wood or cut pieces, I imagined how those same hands would nail boards in my house in Puebla. Now there was no image to motivate me. I worked automatically, watching the clock, waiting for the shift to end. I started to get sick more often. Back pains that I used to endure without problem. Now they knocked me down for a couple of days. Constant headache. The doctor told me it was stress and lack of rest. He might have been right, but I knew that it was also that emotional weight that wouldn't leave me. The relationship with my mom turned cold. We kept talking, but it wasn't the same. Sunday calls became shorter, full of uncomfortable silences. I answered her with monosyllables. And although she told me she loved me and regretted what happened, I felt that those words came late. Very late. With my siblings, things also tensed up. They didn't tell me much, but I know they knew that the money I sent had served to cover their expenses. I noticed it in how they avoided looking me in the eyes when we spoke. And although I didn't complain to them directly, inside my blood boiled. Economically, the blow was strong, not because I was left with nothing. Here in the United States, I continued working and could rebuild myself. But because I realized that 15 years of effort had gone into things that weren't even mine. That I didn't have a plot of land, nor a wall built, nor a door I could say, "I bought this one." Everything was air. I was forced to rethink my life. Before, everything revolved around returning to Mexico. Now I didn't know if I wanted to. I thought, why? To return to the same place, with the same old house and with people who didn't take care of what I gave them. The idea of growing old in Puebla, which used to give me peace, now caused me distrust. I started to shut myself in more. I stopped meeting up so much with other countrymen after work. I limited myself to arriving at the room, having a quick dinner, and going to bed. I would now spend time looking at the ceiling, thinking about what I had done wrong. If it was naivety, overconfidence, or simply bad luck. One day, a colleague told me something that stuck with me. "Luis, the problem is not just that they spent your money. It's that they stole your dream." He was right. Money comes and goes. But what hurts the most is that for 15 years, I clung to an illusion that didn't exist. And now I had to learn to live without it. I also started to see money differently. Before, for me, sending remittances was an act of love, of responsibility. Now, although I continue to send some help, I do it with more care, I opened an account in my name. I keep papers. I don't give explanations of how much I earn or how much I save. I lost that habit of trusting blindly. Physically, the tiredness was noted. I lost weight. The gray hairs became more visible, and even my hands started to tremble when I was very tense. I went to the doctor, and he told me I should take care of my blood pressure. I don't know if it was coincidence or consequence, but I felt that everything was connected. The disappointment, the anger, the stress, the health. There were nights when I thought about leaving everything, returning to Mexico and starting from scratch. But then I remembered what awaited me there, and I stopped. Here, at least, I had work, a roof, and I could save again. There, I only had a broken relationship and a house that was never built. Little by little, I began to accept that that chapter of my life was closed. Not in the way I wanted, but closed at last. And I promised myself that if I invested in something again, it would be with me in charge, with my eyes on it, without intermediaries. I'm not going to lie to you, it still hurts me, still. There are days when I remember silly details. Like one afternoon that I worked 14 hours straight, installing a huge kitchen, thinking that that extra pay would be for the windows of my house in Puebla. And now I know that those windows never existed. But I also understood something. Here, in the immigrant's life, no one takes care of you more than yourself. You can want your family help them, but your future, you have to protect it with your own hands. And I learned that lesson by blows. I'm not going to lie. It took me years to be able to talk about this without my throat closing up. There was a time when every time someone asked me about my mom or about the famous house, I felt like changing the subject or simply leaving. The wound was fresh and I didn't want to touch it. But time cools things down. It doesn't heal them completely, but at least it lets you see them from another angle. The first years after the truth, I maintained a cold relationship with my mom. We talked just enough. How are you? Do you need anything? There were no longer those long Sunday calls where I told her even what I ate. I also realized that she felt the distance. I noticed it in her tone, in how she looked for excuses to hang up quickly. It was as if we both knew there was an elephant in the room, and neither wanted to look at it directly. Almost a year passed since that December before we could talk seriously. It was a normal call. Without planning it, and suddenly she started to cry. She told me that there was not a single day in which she didn't think about what happened. That she knew she failed me. That she had taken something more than money from me. She confessed to me that many times she wanted to tell me the truth. But she didn't know how. That every time she planned to do it, another problem arose, and she postponed it. Until the years had already passed. I'm not going to tell you that with that, I forgave her immediately. But hearing her admit it without excuses loosened my anger a little. I told her what I had kept for so long that it didn't hurt me only the loss of money, but the prolonged lie that I would have understood if she asked me for help for other things, but that I would have liked to decide. She remained silent for a moment and then told me something I didn't expect. I didn't want you to return with empty hands. And without realizing it, that was just what happened. Those words hit me, because I understood that, although she acted wrong, in her head she thought she was doing the right thing. Not for me, but for everyone. For the family. For emergencies. For the needs that were appearing. With time, I was accepting that my mom is not perfect. That she made decisions that hurt me, and that I never would have wanted her to do them to me. but she is also the woman who raised me alone. That she worked of what she could so that I ate. That she taught me to be hardworking. I didn't want to carry all my life with resentment towards her. That doesn't mean that I forgot. I learned to set limits. Since then, the money I send is punctual and clear. This is for such a thing. And if it's not for something specific, I save it myself here. I no longer let anyone else manage what I earn with so much effort. I also changed my way of seeing the future. Before, everything was planned around returning to Mexico. Now I think that my old age can be here or there. But under my conditions, I am not going to tie myself to a single idea. If one day I buy a house in Puebla, it will be with my hands, being present. And if not, let it be where I decide and can enjoy what I build. It was hard for me to accept that the dream that accompanied me for 15 years no longer exists. At first, it seemed to me as if I had wasted half my life. But little by little I realized that not everything was a loss. Because although the house was not built, my efforts supported my family for many years, gave them a roof, food, medicines. And although that was not my plan, in some way, it was also important. That is one of the things that cost me the most to recognize. That part of my sacrifice did serve for something, not for what I wanted. But yes, so that people I love would not go hungry or in need. And that, although it hurts me, is something I cannot ignore. Over the years, I also learned to talk about the topic without shame, because I realized that I am not the only one. Here, among immigrants, I have heard dozens of similar stories. People who sent money for a house, a business, or a plot of land. And when they returned, there was nothing. I realized that the mistake was not only mine. That this happens more than one believes. And instead of hiding it, I started to tell it as a warning. Do not trust everything to a single person, even if it is your mother. I tell the youngest ones who just arrived. Some look at me strangely as I looked at those who told me the same thing before. But I know that even if they don't believe it now, perhaps one day they will remember my words. The reconciliation with my mother was not a magical moment of hug and total forgiveness. It was a process. There were calls where I still got angry, others where she cried, others where we laughed like before. We learned to walk over that wound without opening it too much. Today, if you ask me, I would tell you that I no longer carry the same resentment. What remains is a scar, a reminder. It makes me be more careful, perhaps more distrustful, but also more aware that money is not the most important thing. The most important thing is how and with whom one builds their dreams. And yes, I learned that trust is fragile, that it is earned with years, but it is lost in a moment. And that, even if you can forgive, it never returns to be the same. That is something I have already accepted. If you ask me if I love her, the answer is yes. She is my mother. And if she asks me for help, I will give it. But now I will do it in a way that I can see what it is used for. Not out of revenge, but out of caring for what it cost me to learn. Perhaps the hardest thing of all this was not losing the money or the house, without understanding that dreams can also change, that they are not always fulfilled as you imagine them, and that sometimes you have to let them go to be able to move forward. I let go of that dream. It hurt me, but I did it. And by letting it go, I started to see other possibilities. Maybe I won't have the house in Puebla that I drew as a child, but I can build something else. A life where I have control, where it does not depend on someone else keeping their word. That is the lesson that remained with me. And although it arrived late and in the most painful way, at least it arrived. Just to finish, I wanted to say what I would have liked to hear when I first arrived here. All loaded with dreams and with more desire than cunning, I say it calmly because the strong anger has already passed, and because I learned to speak without my voice trembling so much. I told this in the past because that's how I lived it. But the lessons continued accompanying me every day. What happened to me was that I trusted everything in a single person. Yes, in my mom. And I don't say it with hate. I say it with the truth of a son who broke his back for 15 years and returned to his neighborhood without a house, without land, and with a box of receipts as the only proof that I didn't invent the story. It hurt me. It tossed me. It left me breathless. But I survived. And if you are listening to this with a tight heart because you saw yourself a little in my story, I just want you to take what serves you. The first thing I learned was that money doesn't make the house by itself. Organization makes it. I sent dollars like someone pouring water into a boat with holes. There was always a reason to spend there. That the uncle's medicine, that the cousin's school, that the niece's party, that the neighbor's roof, all urgent. And yes, the need there was real. I didn't deny it. But my mistake was in not setting rules, in not asking for papers, in not saying this is for this and period. I trusted blindly because it was my mom and because since childhood I grew up with that dream of the beautiful house. And my heart won me over. I also understood that distance deceives. From here one thinks that by sending one has already fulfilled, that on the other side someone will walk in a straight line with what you send. But no. Life there also hits. Problems get in the way. People do accounts their way. And your money starts to have other names that are not the ones you had in mind. That now I would have done everything differently. I would have saved in an account in my name. I would have looked for someone trustworthy to go check the land. I would have asked for contracts, deeds, dated photos, progress with signed notes. Yes, it sounds cold, it sounds hard, but it would have saved me 15 years. They asked me if I regretted sending money. Honestly, not all. Because although it broke my soul to see that there was no house, I also knew that my shipments helped ensure there was no lack of food, that someone was secured, that a roof didn't fall. That doesn't erase the deception nor the lie, but it sustained me when I wanted to let myself fall. I told myself, well, the house wasn't built, but it wasn't money thrown in the trash. It served. Only for another destiny, it cost me to accept it, but it helped me forgive a little. Another thing I learned was not to keep the shame to myself. At first I shut up for fear of, I told you so. It gave me shame to admit that they saw my face. But when I started telling it with other buddies at work, I realized that I wasn't the only one. I heard very similar stories. Businesses that never existed, lands that were lost, houses that in photos looked beautiful and in reality were pure, loose bricks. The 20 fell on me that it can happen to those of us who are here because we work so much that we trust not to go crazy. And trusting ourselves is bad. The bad thing is to make the inherramientas. I no longer thought of life only as returning to Mexico with a house. After all, it became clear to me that dreams also change. Before, it scared me to accept that. I felt like I was betraying the child who drew his little house in a notebook. But I understood that that child wanted security. He wanted peace. He wanted a place to rest without leaks. That I could still look for. Perhaps in another place, perhaps in another way. perhaps with less romanticism and more signed papers. It was not giving up the dream. It was maturing it. With my mom, look, I forgave her halfway. Not all at once, not nicely, not like a soap opera. I forgave her in little pieces. One day I understood her fear, another day her necessity, another day her crooked way of solving things. And without justifying what she did, I could see the woman who raised me, tired, solving as best she could. I would have liked her to tell me the truth before, yes. That still hurts me. But carrying resentment was rotting me inside. I let go a little for me. Not for her. I set clear rules. When I send, I say what for, and I ask for proof. If it cannot be proven, I don't send, and that's it. No yelling, no drama, no more rules. To you who are starting or who have been here for years, I would tell you this with all the affection of someone who has already stumbled. Keep your receipts, open your account, have the basics of contracts. Ask someone who knows for help. Don't be ashamed to ask. And if you're going to send to build, don't release everything at once. Step by step. First the land in your name, then the fence, then the footing, then the slab. Everything with photos, with notes, with invoices. If they tell you that you are distrustful, oh well, it's your future. Nobody is going to take care of it for you. I would also tell you not to leave your life on hold. I left it for many years. Everything I wanted I put in the after the house is built drawer. Later I was going to buy the jacket. Later I was going to go to the doctor. Later I was going to learn English well. Later I was going to save for myself. And the later got old for me. When I returned and saw that there was nothing, everything I postponed fell on me. Don't wait to have the house to live. Go to the dentist. Buy that Senta mattress. Give yourself a guilt-free Sunday. What if you empty completely? Because there, if everything goes wrong, nobody gives you back what you took from yourself. They asked me if I would send money for a house again. Yes, but differently. I would have gone in person to see the land. I would have put the deeds in my name. I would have hired a master builder with a contract. I would have made a payment plan by advance and not by promise. I would have gone even if it was a long weekend to see how the work is progressing. And if one cannot travel, I would have gotten someone neutral, not from the family, to supervise. It's heavy, yes. But the peace of mind of seeing a wall erected is worth more than 1,000 almosts. The last lesson I learned was about dignity. I came to feel like a failure, as if 15 years had been for nothing. And it wasn't like that. I worked clean. I didn't get into trouble. I helped my own. I learned an even better trade. I got ahead in a country that is not mine. That counts. If something similar happened to you, don't be hard on yourself. Grit your teeth, redo the plan, and continue. You are not your mistake. You are what you do after the mistake. Now to close, I speak to you as if we were face to face, with a coffee in hand after the shift. Take care of your heart and your wallet with the same strength. Don't turn to stone, but don't stay in it. They fooled me. Yes, they fooled me. And here I am, still wanting to build something of my own. Slower, more conscious, but mine. If one day I return to Puebla with a simple little house, it will be because I saw it being built. And if not, well, I will have a corner here where my old hands can rest without leaks, where I decide, thank you for listening to me. If you made it this far, I truly thank you. It cost me a lot to tell this. but I did it thinking of those who are in the same situation. Tell me too, where are you watching this video from? Are you in the United States, in Mexico, somewhere else? Did something similar happen to you? Do you know someone who has sent money and upon returning found something else? Leave it in the comments so that we don't go carrying these stories alone. And if what I said was useful to you, subscribe to the channel. I am going to continue telling stories of migrants like us, with the truth ahead, so that we accompany each other and learn together. Because in the end, that is what keeps us standing. To know ourselves accompanied, even if we are far.